Hi, everybody. Will here with this week's interview chair. This week we have the incomparable Sam Houston McDonald. Sit back and relax and listen to Sam. Hi, everybody. Will here with this week's interview chair. And in the chair, we have none other than Sam Houston McDonald. Hi, Sam. How are you?
Good afternoon, Will. Good to see you. I'm doing good. Thanks.
Good to see you as well. Irish Wolfhounds, Irish Setters, AKC Judge, all kinds of things you've done, Sam. So how are things there? Is Mr. Frost still there with you?
Mr. Frost is still visiting and has been, and he's absolutely wonderful and so helpful and all that. And we have had so many laughs. We always have a good time.
His interview comes out tomorrow, and I heard what he said to you, so I need you to step up.
Well, excuse me, I don't need to step up. No one would ever think Peter Frost ever compared to me. There is no doubt about it. No doubt about it. That little Australian, That won't ever happen. I'm not worried at all about that. I have to put him in his place once in a while, but that's okay. All right. It happens to all of us.
I see good things happening.
There are only two people I'm afraid of in this world, and that is my ex-wife and Mary Beth O'Neill. Other than that, I'm not afraid of anyone.
All right.
Mary Beth should enjoy that. She knows it's true. Knows it's true. Good.
All right, you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Let's go. Let's begin. Tell me how you got started in the sport of dogs. And I also want to know how old you were when you got started, Sam.
You want to know what?
How old you were when you got started in the sport of dogs.
No, I heard it the first time. I'm ignoring it.
Oh, okay.
So, anyway, no, I'm not. So anyway, the way I got started in dogs, really, I grew up with Cocker Spaniels, Border Collies, Australian Shepherds. We had a farm. Those, the two herding dogs were on the farm. So, and they were expected to work. They weren't
Where was
kids.
the farm?
Outside of Dublin, Texas, where Dr. Pepper started.
Oh.
Where Dr. Pepper, a little bitty town, but that's where the first Dr. Pepper plant was. So, but anyway, we had that. And then we lived in a small town called Stephenville, and my parents had a couple of music stores in two towns and stuff. And so my father had been very much, and my mother too, so very much involved with two things, their church and music. So great people. So especially my mom. So good person. But anyway, so they had these dogs, and my mother also had a Chihuahua. So, and I think as we got older, that's why she wanted the Chihuahua. And as long as my mother wasn't around, she loved us, or he loved us. His name was Pepper. But when my mother came around, we couldn't get close to her. He'd snap our heads off. We even got close to her. Mean little thing. So, but then I am one of those that went to see Big Red. Saturday matinee. Booed.
How old were you, Sam?
I was about, I'm going to say 12 or 13.
All right.
And I came home and I asked my father if I could have one. And he said, when you can afford to buy one and to pay for its care, you can buy it. So into high school, I went. We started out in Waco, Texas, but we moved to Stephenville, and then we had the farm and stuff. And my brothers and I, we had a 59 Ford pickup truck with a granny gear in it and a big hay rack on it. And we hauled hay out of the fields. I think, I'm going to see my brother this afternoon and ask him again. I think we got somewhere between 3 and 5 cents a bale. Wow. 3 and 5 cents a bale. Pardon me. But I raised enough money finally, because I kept looking in the paper and doing things like that as people did. And I ended up in 68 buying my first Irish setter. So this is my 55th year in the breed.
Wow.
But I bought my first Irish setter, and she was out of, Shauna was her name, of course. You got to have that good Irish name. But Shauna was her name. She was Padre Island breeding. So Elizabeth Earhart was not the breeder on it. She had sold the bitch to this man and then bred, and then I got this puppy. But I actually bought her, which most people don't know about me, is I bought her to hunt with. And I grew up in a family of sports. We all played baseball. One of the things that people don't know about me is that one time I was as a young kid, I was a very good baseball player, and I was a pitcher. I played second base, although I was left-handed, but I could handle it. And I even made the All-Stars in baseball when I was playing. So, got in. I wanted an Irish setter, and so as it went on, I raised the money and I bought Shauna in 68. So a while back, a little while back, she was great. And I sent her off for training. She was trained. She was there for about, I think, 2 months, maybe, when she got out of her teens, I would say. But I sent her there and then came home, and we hunted quail and dove in our area. That was really a fowl that was available. And I had grown up shooting guns and all of that, and loved to hunt.
Wow.
So then I'll continue on if you want me to about how
I keep going.
How I got to the show point. Then after that, I graduated from high school and went on to college. And just a little side story that out at the farm, my dad loved white Leghorn chickens. And he bought, I think, a couple of hundred of them and little chicks and stuff, and raised them up and everything else. And I was then going off to college and coming home on weekends, and Shauna was there on the farm. I drove home one Friday afternoon late. I don't know if I should tell this. You may have to cut this out. But my dog came running around the house. My father was running after her, and he had a hatchet in his hand. And I jump out of the car and start yelling at him and everything else. And I go, "What is going on?" He said, "Just go in the backyard and look what happened." I went back there, and there were probably 75 dead chickens.
Oh, wow.
So he was very upset. So he said, "We're going to have to work out something else for you, and you're going to have to get a place so that you have her." And so I took her off to college, and I had a very small, tiny house, but I had a nice big backyard. And so Shauna and I were there in the house. So that was really basically how I got started with Irish setters. And from the time I got her, I loved them. I loved their temperament. I loved the way their eyes looked at me, and she was just great. And so we used to go to the park and hang out with people in college. And one day this gentleman walked by, and he said, "Well, that's kind of a pretty Irish setter." And I go, "Well, thank you," because always proud, So he said, "Do you show her?" And I said, show her what?" And he said, "No. Do you go to dog shows?" And I said, "No, I've never been to a dog show." And he said, "Well," and this was in Denton, Texas. So I don't ever remember meeting Nancy Shepard there. But anyway, it was in Denton, Texas. And he said, well, you should come over and see. And so I did. I thought, well, this is kind of cool. And so I found out kind of things and talked to people and asked them how I did it, what I needed to practice. There were people there. I'm sorry, I don't remember exactly who they were, but they helped me. And people in the Denton Kennel Club there helped me. And so I think it was a couple of months later, I went home with her and I took her off to a dog show. And first she won that blue ribbon. Then we went back in the ring and I thought, why am I going back in the ring? She's already won. She got a blue ribbon. What better can you do than a blue ribbon? And then they gave me a purple ribbon. Well, that purple ribbon meant nothing to me at all. And everybody said congratulations. But as I found out later on when I came out of the ring, there weren't enough bitches to make a point. So Shauna almost got her first point. So as I did, there were some Irish setter people there. I started visiting with them. And I can be very friendly. And so I was visiting with them and everything else, and they were talking about things, and they were really nice about it and nice about her. But as time went on, I found out she wasn't as good as I thought she was. She was always good to me, but structurally, she was a great mover, though. That was the neat thing about her. She loved to run around the ring, but I knew I had to do something different. So anyway, that's kind of how it started. But I decided while I was in college, that I would breed my first litter. And I was trying to find out how to go about it. And someone in the Denton Kennel Club, I believe, not an Irish setter person, but in the Denton Kennel Club, told me about a lady that they knew, and her name was Sue Summers. Most Irish setter people wouldn't even know who she was. She was very much a part of the breed. And she had Somerset Irish setters, but not the Somerset we think of.
Oh, okay.
When we look back at the history, she was SUMMER. But anyway, Sue was truly my first mentor. And I absolutely adored this lady because she couldn't have been more helpful, because she started me on the right track. I would never, I'm sorry, this fly keeps buzzing me, but it's Texas, it's 110 in the shade. They all want to come in too. So Sue was a research librarian at the University of Texas in Arlington, at the university there, and was quite the reader and gathered, I don't know, 6 or 8 books. Some were little thin ones and some were others, and brought these books to me and everything else and said, spend some time and read these. And I found them fascinating. And as they began to talk about structure and things like that, I really didn't understand a lot about it. But through Sue's help, I began to garner some of the things I truly use today. So as I judge the dogs. So she was a great friend. We lost her early, I'm sorry to say, to illness, but she was really my first true mentor. Elizabeth Earhart was far away from me. So, but she also bred one of the nicest dogs I ever knew, and that was Padre Island Sea Storm. And I don't want to be too depressing in this talk, but if you know the story about Stormy was Padre Island Sea Storm is truly the darkest Irish setter I've ever seen to this day. And not that I don't see some real mahogany dogs, but this was an extremely dark eyes, beautifully put together dog, very balanced. And he was to go, I won't say, but he was to go to a handler out in California. And so Elizabeth lived down in Corpus Christi, Texas, and I think they had to travel up to maybe San Antonio or something, but to fly the dog out. The dog was sent and everything else, and he got lost when he got to LAX, and they did not find him for 5 days.
Jeez.
And so they lost the dog. And but he was supposed to go out and be shown and everything else, and I'm sure. But to this day, I still remember him too, because I was just so fascinated with him. I had my Shauna was a very light chestnut color, and boy, did I love that dark mahogany.
So
I thought it was cool.
So Stormy got lost for 5 days, but they did find him?
Yes, but he wasn't alive.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. So that was kind of a sad thing, but it was another dog. It was a dog that I truly remembered and learned from. And my friend during that time, my friend Sue Summers, was telling me how much in describing. She was great, because when I decided to breed Sue was great about a number of things. So when I decided to breed my first litter in college, she looked around and she had several dogs. She asked me what I thought at the time was, what is it of your business? But she said, why are you wanting to breed a litter? And so my answer is so that I could get something better to show, because I had already been bitten by the bug. So anyway, she did take me around, ended up setting up several things, 3 different dogs to look at. One was definitely a field dog and in a pen, but she said, now, just because he has all this hair on him and everything else, you need to get out. And she went and pointed out the attributes. And that was another thing that she taught me. Quit looking at all the bad stuff and start looking at what the good stuff is, and start learning about why they needed this and need this to hunt. And it made a big impression on me also. I thought, wow, okay. And so they need this, they need the balance. She went through all of this, sinning, all of this stuff that she talked about. So I looked at that dog. The last dog I went to was a show dog, and his name was Draheron Firebrand. And he was from that famous litter back then, of the fire litter of Lucy James. And when I saw him, Baron was his call name. And when I saw him, I just loved him. And he came over and all but hugged me. He was just that kind of dog, and nice, easy temperament and everything else. And so Sue and I talked afterwards and went back and forth. But anyway, I bred to Draheron Firebrand, and that's where my first litter came from. I was in college. I must have been crazy. I was taking 18 hours and taking care of, I think it was 8 or 9 puppies. I can't remember exactly. But oh my gosh, I thought, how stupid is this? So, but anyway, we got through it, had no trouble with the homes. The homes turned out good. At least I never got any bad feedback about them or anything else. And the people seemed happy, and I kept in touch for a long time. So anyway, a couple of them were shown, pointed, but didn't succeed. And they were with kind of novice people and everything else, but they just needed better work with their dogs. They weren't so well behaved in the ring. Yeah. But I didn't care at that time. And I thought, what's the big deal? So anyway, that was my first litter. And from there, I went on. And then,
that would be the early 70s then, Sam?
Very early 70s. I joined the Irish Setter Club of America in 71.
Okay.
And then that's when I got more information, and I started to, and I ended up, oh gosh, what was her name? I'm trying to think of the mother's name. It just slips in my mind. But Baron was bred to another bitch. And it went back, gosh, it was Jules. What was that? I can't remember her name. well, anyway, it doesn't matter. Baron, it was another Baron litter. And I took a male puppy from that. And because I'd bred the Baron, they gave me, and my litter really didn't turn out, they gave me this Brody. And so we called him Brody. And that's when I really started trying to show more and everything else. And he was an absolutely sweetheart of a dog also. He was very much like his dad. If I were going to change the father, it would have been the width between the ears. They were too much back skull on them and stuff. And my dog had that too, but he did well. It was during the time he was shown by me. And when we made majors in Texas back in those days, he was on the spring circuit, and Tom Tobin and Ken Neal and Paul Holmes, who I adore, and a few other handlers would come over and take those 9 or 12 majors away, and off they'd go back to California and Arizona. And so during that time, I showed him myself for a couple of years, and he did go fourth at the National under Ellsworth Howell in a big open class, and that's back when the classes were much bigger then. But he went fourth, so he was a nice dog. But anyway, he got 12 major reserves, most of them to those people I've just named. But I kept smiling. And then I decided Jim and Sally Long.
Oh, yes.
Jim and Sally Long became friends of mine over the years. And they used to come and stay with us. And so finally I decided, I said, no, Jim, I want to do this myself. And he said, look, let me take this dog down to Houston. We're going to get majors. They came and stayed at the house, went on down to Houston with him. And he got his 13th major reserve. And I said, never again will he go in the ring.
Wow.
Enough. And I left it at that. I mean, at that time, did I want a champion? Yes, I did. But anyway, so in that meantime, I had graduated from college, moved to the Valley of Texas, ended up meeting my future wife. And we had Brody and we had Shauna. And then we ended up moving up to Fort Worth, where we both were teachers. I was a speech pathologist. At the time, she was English, and she also coached. And she had played volleyball and other sports, and especially volleyball in college. I was on the college team. And so we moved up there. We took our dogs to Fort Worth. And so I said to her, by then, I was starting to meet people. I had come to know Joyce Nielsen, you may have heard of that name, and Lucy Jane Myers, and Ted Eldridge. And it was funny, a little side story. I was told by some local people there in Fort Worth, because we got involved in our center club there. And I said, well, I want to reach out and start talking to these people. These seem to be the three people, as I learned and acquired education. These are the people that have really been doing something with our setters as far as breeders. I need to talk to them. And they said, oh, you can't call them. I go, why not? And they said, oh, no, I don't think, they don't know you, they wouldn't. And I thought to myself, well, of course, what would Sam Houston McDonald do? Pick up the phone and call him. All were delightful. I really meant Charlie and Joyce. They used to come on the Texas circuit. Charlie showed also. And this started a deeper mentorship. Joyce and Charlie couldn't have been more wonderful. We used to sit in their motorhome there in the parking lot of the Fort Worth shows and visit for hours. and look at dogs and look at pictures and talk about things. And that's where I learned about Thindaran dogs and began to know enough to admire the way their fronts were built. They were just so correct many times. Not all of them, that's the way it is. But you saw correctness, and I mean true correctness. Not a little return of upper arm, not a little shoulder layback, but the proper that our breed should have or our setter should have. So that was where I am I going on too much about this?
No, this is great. You keep going, Sam.
So pardon me. So anyway, Joyce and Charlie and Sally and Jim. Jim was so funny. He was absolutely funny. So very dry humor. But anyway, and then I with the story and firebrand stuff and that and my Brody and all that, I contacted Lucy Jane Myers and I spoke to her. You know, Lucy Jane was always cautious, I would say. That's how I put it when you first contacted her. As I got to know her after a couple of phone calls, she couldn't have been more kind. As was Joyce, not sitting at the ring. Everybody, these people were competitive, but to speak to them and speak to the breed, they couldn't have been more delightful.
I'm sure. That'd be something.
Oh, and so Lucy Jane used to say, "Now you need to look at this and everything else." And I said, "Well, I've got to talk to Patsy and see what I want to do. But I think if you have a litter and you have a nice bitch, we might be interested in the next year or so." So I got off the phone with her and everything else. Patsy was messing with our daughter or whatever she was doing, messing with the dogs or the cats. We had Siamese cats also. So anyway, I told her, I said, I talked to Lucy Jane and I told her, you know, that we might be interested in a bitch. I was kind of saying that hopefully so that she said for her, because Patsy she came into this, you know, she wasn't already showing dogs. And she said, "What if I don't want one from Lucy Jane Myers?" I went, "What?" And she says, "Well, I'd rather look around and see." And by then we had pictorials, you know, I mean, she wanted to. And so therefore she looked around and she said, "I like these Bayberry dogs." I said, "Oh." She said, "Why don't you call the Brooks? Bill and Patsy Brooks. Why don't you give them a call and talk to them and see what they can do?" So I called Bill and Patsy and spoke to them. They couldn't have been nicer either. I always joke, back then you paid for long distance phone calls. Later on, I used to joke with Patsy about the fact, Patsy, because she talks so slow and such a lady and everything else, but very slow. I said, a phone call to them always cost me twice as much. So, but anyway, I called her and I called them and everything else. And they said, "Well, we do have a bitch here." And, but she came in, she was bred actually, Bayberry Southerner was her father. And Jane Gavin had actually done the breeding and they had gotten a puppy from that. And so anyway, they said, her name is Abby and she's available and she's a little bit older. And we wanted to we liked that idea of a little bit older to see, you know, you're always hopeful with a puppy and they look good and you hope to grow. But we were looking to breed something. And so, and I had waited, you know, we weren't going to do this. So ended up, Abby flew in, picked her up, took her out of the crate. She really was not sure about us. And anyway, she stayed behind the couch for about 2 days. So she just didn't, but once she came out of her shell, she came out of her shell. And she placed at the National, I think in California. But we were really looking to her. She was lovely. She had that pretty, pretty Bayberry head, you know, and she had lots of Travelda in her. And so we just kind of fell in love with her and everything else. So after we showed her and everything else, we started.
Any photos of her, Sam?
Probably somewhere in a box, Will, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
I hope I could find them.
Okay.
But yes, but I do think I have. I'll have to look somewhere else. I have. When I get to the breeding, I'll look for pictures of her puppies because they were quite nice. So I'm still working on my second litter, and so we have Abby, and she's about to come into season, and I had become friends because of the Texas shows and stuff, and Myra and Thorne Harris of Glendie Kennels used to come up. So I thought, wow, she's a wild woman. and I could say that about her. But she would come and talking in that loud voice and everything else. And she knew about showing and showing. She put on a show inside and outside of the ring. And I got to know her some, and she saw Abby, and we looked, and so anyway, I said, well, I'm looking to breed her, but I don't know who I'm going to breed her to. So the National came up in Texas. Marquis was there. Medlark's Masterpiece. It got down to a decision between those two for the breed that day. And there was Penny in the ring showing Masterpiece. And of course, George Alston was on Marquis. But anyway, we looked at the dogs and we thought, well, maybe Marquis would be good. Now, you have to understand at the time, I was certainly not as knowledgeable as I am now. And knowing about what we're doing, I learned so much over the years about looking at pedigrees, looking at dogs, looking at, are they pre-po? There's so many things involved in breeding that you just don't look at this dog and this breed. Oh, okay, let's do that. Sometimes I'm sure it works, but for the most part, it needs to be more educated. It's still a chance, but It needs to be more educated. So anyway, we were looking around, and George wanted to see Abby, and we had her there, and we brought her around and everything else. And George, in his way, said, I don't think Marquis is the right dog for her, and walked away. Now, I love George, and I do. And Marianne, we've been friends for a very long time now. But anyway, so he just said it wasn't. And of course, Patsy and I were just kind of devastated, but this is the dog we want to breed to. So a little time went on, and Myra and Thorne had a bitch name. I haven't pulled these names out of way back in the back of my brain. Rossell's Bridie Rose. And she was a lovely bitch. I had seen her. And I don't know if they leased her or they owned her. I would have to look back at that to see. But anyway, they had Bridie Rose, and they bred to Marquis. And they had this litter that produced different dogs with different kill names on them. There was Rossell's Rosalie, who Bruce ended up showing out in California. Yeah. There was Glendie Stonecutter that Ken showed.
And he had.
And let's see, who's the other one that's in there? Charlton's Oriental Jade. And there was one other in the litter. Why can't I think of his name?
She was something.
Well, we'll get to that. You think? So anyway, they had this litter, and also Glendie's Diamond in the Rough. There's the other one. So I was talking to Myra after I probably had my tail tucked between my legs, because I felt bad, like, oh my gosh, but I want to breathe. And Mama said, she said, well, maybe he's not the right dog. But she said, I have a dog, Glendy's Diamond in the Rough, that I kept from this litter. This is this is a younger litter. And she said, the way they're going up, they're looking really good. If you'll just hold off a little bit, let's get them up and everything else. And then you can think about that way. So we held off a little bit. And Abby was only probably 2, maybe 2.5 then when we were looking to breed her. So we held off. Diamond grew up. He was quite the lovely dog. And when I say lovely, I mean correct in many ways. And so we kind of waited around, and then we spoke to Myra. I hopped in our van. We had a van by then. We quit going in our little Dodge Dart or whatever it was. It's crammed in there with a crate in the trunk and all this stuff going off to dog shows. We actually had a van. I drove the van down all night because I was teaching. I was a speech pathologist, and I had to work, make that money, to support this habit, as did Patsy. So I drove down, took Abby. She was a little early in season, got there overnight and slept in the van. And then the next morning, Thorne is tapping on the window and woke up, and he said, here, put her on a lead. She was laying there with me. He said, put her on a lead, and I'll take her around there and take care of her. Well, at the time, they dipped him. And to make sure, I couldn't blame them back in those days about fleas and stuff, sure. Especially. So they dipped her and everything else. And he brought her around so that I could see her running around the pool and stuff. And she was fine. And he come on in the house. Myra, who I had mostly seen in her I'm going to call her, she would appreciate this, wild woman stage, could not have been more of a lady and such a wonderful hostess. As I went into her house, and they knew I was there. She had this lovely breakfast for me, this great room to stay in. I loved all their Dutch doors in their house. So they had dogs in different rooms, but they could always be seen and heard and up and down. And I just loved it, and I really enjoyed. And I remember asking Myra, "How do you get all that coat on your dogs, Myra?" And she said, "But that's because they go swimming in the swimming pool every day." So whether it was true or not, that was what she told me. But anyway, her dogs carried a lot of coat. But we bred to Diamond in the Rough. We had a nice litter. I think there were 7 or 8 in it. And out of it, we had, by then, talked to the Brooks, and we were using the Bayberry prefix as time went on. And Patsy and Bill couldn't have been nicer. Bill had come to Dallas for business one time. And of course, Will, my entire, maybe even before being involved in these talks, but I know that the cliche is that I'm a sponge, but I was a sponge about learning about dogs. Dogs in general, specific things about dogs, especially structure, fascinated me and has and continues to fascinate me. I still learn things every single day or relearn them. Forgot about it. Things that I read. I read a number of books. Sam Ewing, and we'll get to the Wolfhounds, but Sam Ewing provided me a wonderful library and a lot of old books that he bought in his travels and of the history, and especially in Ireland and England and that, which always had Irish Wolfhounds in it, but also had Irish setters. And these great things. And it provided me an education to know a lot about how Irish setters developed. So that was the part. And Sam also taught me a lot about structure, because certainly our setters and Irish Wolfhounds are not built alike. So some things maybe, but there are other things that are very distinct to the breeds. So anyway, I bred this litter, had nice, I think, one became an international Mexican champion, and he ended up going, they say his name was Bayberry Fiery Display. Dr. Jose Cruzet bought him in Mexico City, and he was a dentist there. And he came up, we met him, and he came up actually a couple of times and visited with us and stuff. Wonderful person. And of course, they didn't have quality dog food back then. He bought fresh vegetables and stuff like that, potatoes and all that, and cooked for the dog and for the number of other dogs he had. So, but he was a delightful person. And let's see, Bayberry Fire Display. I'm trying to think the others that were in there. We had a bitch that won the novice class at the largest national entry-wise in Kentucky at that many years ago when, who did the breed? Had the men's store out in Carmel. Lost his name, Will. Anyway, and he judged the national there, but she won the novice class, and I want to say maybe there were 35 or whatever. It was a huge entry. And then they went on, and we finished a number out of the litter. Bayberry Teacher's Pet and Fire Display. But the pig dog's bite went off. And I remember when Myra came up for shows, and they were about 3 months old, and maybe a little older than that. And because I'd held on to him, hoping that his bite would improve, and it didn't. And Myra goes over this dog, and she goes, "Oh my gosh, this is diamond in the rough. This is a beautiful dog." And just as a cursory kind of thing, she popped up on the mouth, and she popped it open, and she went and started looking at the length of the jaws and everything else. And she said, "He's going to be very happy in a pet home, and that's where he needs to go." Yeah. See, there's all these lessons that we learn along the way. And but they're good lessons. They really are. You don't make them bad, you make them good. And from that, I learned. And it had to do with form and function and what they should be and what the standard says. I kept thinking, if I could just get to that even bite, we'd be okay. But I could never reach it. And it was very obvious. So maybe he could have finished. I don't know back then. Maybe he could finish or not. I don't know. But I didn't try. And he went to a lovely companion home and lived to be like 15 and heard from the people always. So that was the litter, and so we went forward from there. So it was great. But I'm so fortunate. So
you've had some wonderful interactions with Irish setter royalty.
Well, you know what? I still think of them as royalty.
They are. There's no question.
So I feel honored. I think of the people who have sat at our kitchen table and stayed with us, Ann Savory and Claire Andrews, and do you remember Evelyn Anderson out in Colorado?
No.
And she had a lot to do with Endearin stuff.
Yeah. And
Evelyn came, and Evelyn finally went off and got very involved in the Olympic Committee and did a lot with that. And so kind of went a different way. And, I remember we moved along with the dogs. I got off track there. We moved along with our dogs, and we're showing them and finishing some and working on others. And then sadly, Patsy and I got a divorce. And so I took the dogs. I moved to my parents had some property and they had a summer house, and I moved into the summer house and built a kennel. And so a small kennel to house my dogs. And I'd acquired a beagle, Starbucks beagle.
Wow.
From David Hiltz, who went in 86 or 87, I can't remember, went winner's bitch at the Beagle National. But she was 4 times hang 'em high. So I figured you would remember those dogs.
Yeah, for sure. Wow, that's excellent.
Where did I go from there? I continued. So Danvers, Massachusetts. I went to all the nationals, by the way, but I don't say that too much because even though my parents are dead, I didn't tell the truth. So I said I needed a little bit more extra money for college, and I got it. But I jumped on a plane and started going, including the first national in Pennsylvania, 71. I'm kind of backtracking here, but that was my personal things. I didn't really meet that many people, but it was a quick trip, and I saw the dogs. And of course, back then, the cost of national wasn't but 2 days in Pennsylvania. But I went. But at the Danvers, Massachusetts, I'm going to go. My client, Bayberry Clancy O'Halloran, was another one from that litter, from the Diamond in the Rough that finished. And I took him and showed him in some class at the National, and he went second. He did well. But anyway, I was there. By then, I had met Denny Harden and Bernie Barron, and who were all leaders in the club at that time. And I had been fortunate before to have met Louis Akabuchi a couple of times. But I met them and everything else. And so I'm finished showing and everything else. And Bernie Barron walks over to me with Denny and says, can you help us out? One of the people that was supposed to do parking, where parking is refusing to do it. And would you mind going out in this field and parking cars and stuff? And I go, no, not at all. So I went out there and parked cars and parked them for about maybe 4 hours. I don't know. It had gotten a little warm that day. But anyway, at the end of the day, so they were both, Denny and Bernie were visiting with me. And so through all of that, they ended up, and by the end of that national, asked me to be on the parent club board for the Irish Setter Club of America. And I always say the reason that I was asked to be on the board is because I parked cars. And I believe that to this day. I park cars. So it just shows you. We need shows need workers to do everything. There's nothing beneath us that we shouldn't be able to do at all. Whatever is needed, jump in there and help. So that launched me into 25 years on the ISCA board, including finally president of it, and continued with my dogs. And while I was traveling and stuff up to the shows, by then I was going to Westminster every year because I always got sick and had to stay out of work in February. It was very funny. Every year the dates were about the same.
Yeah.
But I started going to the garden a long time ago, and I met Barbara and Alan Kloss, and they had a bitch there, champion Powderhorn's Glory Road, which was quite a lovely bitch also. And I thought, gosh, this is really nice. And as I got to know them and everything else, and then as I came up the next couple of times, they said, why don't you stay with us? You can take the train up or whatever. They were up in Connecticut, take the train up and everything else, and we'll drive down to the garden, all that. And we did that. And then Glory Road, and then they started specialing her, and we're looking for some help to special her, and we made a deal that I would get a puppy. And when she was bred, when Glory Road was bred, I got my champion powderhorn called the Glory. And that is the one that Jeanette Holmes showed and did very well with her and got the first best in show on a dog for me. And still makes me want to cry.
Yeah.
There was nothing like the first. Nothing like the first. Sorry to be emotional.
That's all right. That's all right. I get it.
It brings back a lot of memories.
Yeah.
A lot of memories. But, you know, there were so many people who you wanting a person wanting education or knowledge or whatever, you got to take that first step. These people aren't going to walk up to you and say, what would you like to know about Irish setters? That's ridiculous. And it's the way you approach them and what you do. Don't go running up to them. Get to know them. Enjoy life with them. And then later on, listen. I tell people, listen.
Yeah.
Quit trying to act like you know things. Listen. And if you listen, you'll learn so much. Absolutely so much. So all these years I've been blessed with wonderful dogs and wonderful people. Jeanette Frederick Holmes is still one of my dearest friends. And her ex, Paul, Paul was wonderful when he used to come to the Texas shows. And he was always so good to Patsy, and he always gave me such a hard time. Now, I've been known to give people a hard time too, but over the years, Paul and I give each other a hard time. But Paul was the kind of person that when you ask a question, he kind of answered it with a question. You know, kind of like, what do you think? Making you think rather than just giving you this answer, making, well, what do you think? He would ask questions around. And he was good about that. But all of these, I was blessed. I've been so lucky, but I think it taught me so much about what to breed, how to breed. I think as I look back, if there were anything I was going to change about what I've done in dogs, it would be that I wouldn't have bred that litter in college. That I should have waited. I learned that lesson and not. They were fine and people were happy with their puppies and stuff. But to really get something, and it's not that I didn't try by breeding into a better dog, but sometimes I think it's better that especially that I learned is, and Patsy taught me this. I have to say this because when she said, well, maybe I don't want your heron, when we ended up getting the Bayberry bitch, it opened up a whole nother world. It put us, when I came on the board, the first person that day, and we met under the seating of the garden back in one of those little rooms in those days, and the meeting lasted less than 2 hours. I knew Ted. I walked in the room, and when I came on the first board meeting in February at the garden, I came for we used to have our Irish Setter Club of America meeting there for the board. I walked in the door, and the first person that stood up and said, welcome, Sam, come and sit by me, was Ted Eldridge. Couldn't have been more kind, made me fit in, just a delightful man, and our relationship grew a lot. And it means a lot to me. But that was true of LJ, and that was Joyce and I kind of battled back and forth. Do we have time for one funny story about Joyce?
Of course we do. Okay. We can make this a two-part if we have to, Sam.
Okay, so anyway, I had to go on and on, but there's just so much. I don't want to leave things out that meant a lot because in a way, what Joyce asked me, I was judging the Irish Setter Club of the Pacific Specialty, and it wasn't Cherry Coke, who I liked a lot. I liked Cherry Coke a lot. I thought she was a very nice bitch. It was another, maybe a litter sister of hers. But anyway, between that bitch, whatever Charlie was showing, and whatever I put up, I don't even remember, but I gave them reserve winner's bitch. And in the end, and then I did the breed and on and on. And so I was sitting down, I was exhausted. It had been a big entry. It kind of got warm that day. And I'm sitting in a chair, and Joyce comes up. The edge of the ring is right next to me, at the fencing. And Joyce walks up and puts her chair down and sits down and says, "Oh, Sam, it's so good to see you. How are you doing?" and everything else. "Did you enjoy your day?" and all that. "Oh, it was all great," and everything else. She says, "Let me ask you this. Do you think you're a better breeder or a better judge?" And I broke out in laughter because it was so. I think it was Joyce's way of saying, "You should have put my bitch up for winner's bitch." But we laughed, and we both started laughing, and people started looking at us like, "What are these two laughing about?" But we were laughing, but I loved it. But you know what, Will? It also made me think, can you wear two hats? Absolutely. But you got to concentrate. If you're going to do it, you got to concentrate on both.
Yeah.
So are you a better breeder or a better judge? So I think that's a good question for a number of people, especially those that are judging that are still active in dogs.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the answer is for each individual, but it gave me an answer. So, yeah. So anyway, that's kind of some of the shenanigans that we had, and Joyce and I left. And of course, I knew Joyce and Charlie well by then and everything else, but it was so nice. I look back on Irish setters, and not that wolfhounds are my breed too, but Irish setters, I look back on them, and they're the nearest and dearest thing to me.
Yeah.
And when they're good, they're good. But I look back and I think of the contributions that those people, Ted and LJ, as I called her, and Joyce, the contributions that they made to this breed. Not that there weren't others. I mean, Rose came along. There were some beautiful Meadowlark dogs. There's a number of other breeders who bred stuff and everything else. I don't want to take away from them. But for the most part, when you went to a dog show, you didn't have to have a catalog. You knew where they came from.
Right.
You recognized thin Darren dogs who were Andrew and Travella. And although they were different styles, they were all very correct. They were Irish setters.
Mr. E was the reason I love Irish setters. So,
who's that?
Mr. E was the reason I love Irish setters.
Yes,
I used to visit him as a child, and we'd look at dogs and talk about dogs, and he's the reason I love Irish setters.
I think that's very sweet, Will. I really do. I think there are those people I remember in my life that are gone. I never thought I'd be the old fart in the breed. I used to look at these old people in the breed, and I want to say, where in the hell is this 55 years gone? Because now I look at myself in the mirror, and I'm the old fart. I'm one of the old farts in the breed. So I don't know if I can say that or not, but I just said it. So, but I think anyone who knows me knows that I am about education. It's a passion for me. Not only was it in my work, but it was a passion for me in this breed. And in the beginning, and even now today, I'm still a student. I can learn things from people. Every day I learn something. And as I talk to people about other breeds, you learn more also. Yeah. And you learn those nuances of that breed, what makes it that. And as you go on, it increases your knowledge. But I've been fortunate to have great mentors and made me understand the make and shape of the dogs. But I can't remember his name now, and he was big anatomy, he used to bring the skeleton of his dog and was it Ham? No, it wasn't Ham.
Quentin Laham.
Quentin Laham. Quentin Laham taught me a lot at his seminar when I went about how the structure, how the bones fit together, why they fit together this way and all that. I have to say that his seminar that I went to, and that was really my only interaction with him, I learned a lot that day.
Yeah.
I wanted to repeat it. I wanted to go to it again right after it finished because there were so many things, and I was big on trying to make notes and stuff like that. But I learned about basic structure from him a lot too. And that was many a moon ago now when I went to that too. But I think about it, and they've been gone. Was it Betsy? Wasn't that her name?
Yeah, he and Betsy.
Yeah. So anyway, who I got to know too. Probably liked her better. But anyway, but learned a lot. Yeah. So I think, gosh, what would I want to say to the Irish setter world? I think everybody is trying to, you always shoot for that perfect dog. I learned that a long time ago. Yes, we want to breed that perfect dog, but most likely you're not going to do it. But you want to get as close as you can. And when you have problems arise, we're all going to have problems. Yeah. Everybody has problems. But it's how you address it, not only with the people who get the puppies if you have problems, but also in your breeding program. You've got to determine, I think there's a loss of knowledge for pedigrees. I don't think people look at pedigrees. And I have to say,
not the way they used to, that's for sure.
No, but I have to say, Will, when you look at the pedigrees of these dogs, they're not so tightly bred anymore in many cases. That's not everybody, because if somebody sees this, they're going to say, oh, wait a minute, mine are tightly bred. Well, I'm not saying everybody, but I'd say for the most part, and knowing what you went to Thin Darren if you really needed to improve your fronts, and then you came back into your own stuff. That's kind of what people did. I'm not speaking for myself now, but I know people who did that. And there were reasons, for doing that. But it was planned.
Yeah.
Everything planned. And I think it's now, it appears, maybe it's because I'm not so actively breeding, maybe it appears that way.
Well, it's funny, Wayne and I were talking about that this morning. We were talking about delayed gratification, how the world has become an instant gratification place, but the more successful breeders of the bygone years had delayed gratification. They looked 10 years down the road.
Absolutely.
That's
very
what interesting.
Plan to do. But pardon me, I also learned that from my mentors. And I'm glad I said that, but I was always embarrassed in a sense. I know that sounds funny, but I was embarrassed that I had bred that litter in college.
Yeah.
Because it's not the end of the world, but it's still, it was fine. But I learned now, this is something you don't need to do. And even in this day and time, you need to know this breed, and you need to also be honest about your dogs. So when you're looking at your dogs, you need to know what it needs to have to be what it's supposed to be. And you have to know why it's built the way it's built to make it function properly. So when you're looking at our setters, we talk about, I'm going off another direction. Is that okay?
Oh, yeah. You're in charge, Sam.
When we talk about our setters specifically, balance is the key word. It's in the standard 12 times. We talk about balance and everything else, but what they were saying, or what I think, and this is my opinion, and I share this, what I think is that the balance that they're speaking of is not just the front end and the rear end. Are they balanced angle-wise? This is the whole balance of the dogs. And as I teach as the judge's education person for our setters, I teach that the head and the neck and the body and the tail should all be in balance. And that's what makes it smooth. But within those parts are specific things that make this breed correct. The shape of the skull, the length of the muzzle, the occipital protuberance, occipital, pardon me, the depth of the muzzle, the clean neck, the arch of the neck as it fits in and how it fits with the beautiful shoulder lay back, long upper arm, how they connect, point of shoulder, all of that. Each one of these goes along, but each part of them, the body, the length of the body, the slightly sloping top line, all of these, the length of the ribs, the length back of the rib cage. How important is that? And I tell people, it's got to be 2/3 and 1/3 for me. 2/3 and 1/3 of loin, I'm okay with it. I'm okay. But that's the least it should be. To support that back and to hunt all day, it's got to have something to hold it up.
That's right. Structure.
So structure and the tail and the importance and the croup and all of that fits in. I was maybe with Peter, I was laughing and stuff. When I first started showing our setters, we still held that tail down some.
Yeah, we talked about this. Yeah.
We held it down. So, there's so many things. The way you show dogs has gone on. But I think if people would spend a little more time in looking at pedigrees, but also it saddens me that I was thrilled, I guess, at the National when I did the National this last time. And it thrilled me that so many people stayed when I did Brood Bitch. And I appreciated that because if you don't go to Stud Dog and Brood Bitch at your National, you're making one of the biggest mistakes. Can it be boring to some? Yes, it never is to me. And I love judging it. And you have to get it right. You see Mama in this case, and maybe those two children don't look like Mama, but they look alike. They're built alike. It may be a dog and a bitch. It may be 3 or 4 behind. But that consistency that maybe from Mama, that's what you're getting, at least through that sire. So maybe that's the way you want to try to look for your bitch. If the breed bitch doesn't look like the whole group of pups behind, but yet maybe it looks like the sire, then maybe there's a little prepotency there. Maybe he's throwing himself. And that's when you go and start watching Stud Dog and find out if that dog's there or what puppies he's produced. Old story, I'd done the Our Setter Club of Minnesota back before I had my license, and I did sweepstakes, and I drove up there with a bitch to show the rest of the weekend. And my bitch, something happened to her when we were in a ditch dodging a tornado on the way up. And in the middle, I was driving late because, I only had so much time. I was driving late and they had flashing lights, pulled us off. And the officer came out, the highway patrolman, and said, I don't even remember it was, I don't know where I was, up 35, towards Minnesota, though. I was pretty far up. Get in the ditch right now. I said, I have a dog in the back. Get the dog and get in the ditch. That's what he said to me. So I did. The tornado was very near. It didn't do us. But whatever I did trying to get her over there and get her down, she was limping. Yeah. And so I tried to show her the day after I judged, and she was limping. So I think I blamed it on Sue Corwood, Sue Hainan. Blamed it on her. She used to wear golf shoes. And I told the judge, I said, I think she stepped on my bitch. But she didn't. And then I started laughing. I go, no, she didn't. And Sue starts laughing. She says, you are rotten. You are rotten. So, but anyway, there at that show, I had set up on the side. It was at a polo field. I was sitting up on the side of the grounds, and I kept watching all these. And it was a big entry. You know, they'd had a big specialty, and I had a number of things that I liked in sweepstakes and beautiful stuff that came down from Cortwood that the Spangs had. Kathy Spang that had some of that stuff. But anyway, I kept looking, and I didn't have a catalog with me at the All Breed. And so I kept saying, who's that dog out of? Who's that bitch out of? Who's that dog out of? Who's that bitch out of? And every time that I asked that, they said, it's out of Champion Charlton's Moon Lover. And I said, I got to breed to this dog. And that's when I was told that he was no longer living. And of course, they didn't have any semen on him. But that was when I was really beginning to judge. And I think I was developing an eye for what I preferred in the breed. But I'm saying maybe there were 8 or 10 of his kids that were there, and they were all absolutely wonderful to look at and specials. And of course, he went on Manuscript and Marksman, and those kids were pretty nice. And of course, Marksman was the sire of my champion Battlehorn's Call to Glory. So that was kind of neat. Yeah.
Well, Sam, I want to keep going, but we've reached our allotment for this. So I want to do part 2 next week if you're available.
I am available. We can set that up. That would be wonderful.
Well, let's do it. I'm going to put it in my book. You put it in your book, and we'll meet same place, same time, and we will do part 2 of Sam Houston McDonald.
Thanks for letting me live some memories.
Oh, it's been wonderful, Sam. And we're not done yet. Thanks, Sam. That was great. And we're not done yet. There's going to be a part 2 with Sam Houston McDonald because he has more to tell us. He's got more stories. We haven't even touched on wolfhounds yet. So stay tuned for part 2. If you like what you're seeing here, make sure you press the like, share, and subscribe button. If you want to find out what's happening in Will's world, go to my new website, Will Alexander's Dog Show Tips, and you'll find out everything there is to know about me. Well, maybe. And don't forget about the podcast. Every Thursday, the Dog Show Drive with Wayne Kavanaugh and myself. Until then, take care out there.